Welcome to Tales from the Bridge, Episode 2. My name is Tristan.
And I'm Marty.
I'm Kevin.
And I'm Sam.
In this episode, we talk about David Zindell's Neverness, an excellent book. I think we all pretty much enjoyed this one, so we have a great conversation about it. We're going to end off the show with some trivia. Be sure to stick around to find out what Kevin has us reading for the next episode. So yeah, let's make our way over to the bridge. It's a really good argument. Now, this is kind of a classic argument. Star Wars or Star Trek?
The eternal debate.
One's movies and one's TV. So to me, they're genre specific. So Star Wars is the better movie than any Star Trek movie. I don't know that Star Trek. There's never been a Star Trek movie for me that just wasn't like a really long episode or a long episode I didn't really need. And then for me, Star Trek is that sort of it's like my daily fix of like kind of hokey special effects and all that kind of stuff. It's a little campier. It's even like Next Generation or whatever. Like there's going to be, a kind of weird, make up aliens show up who speaks great English and
it's the universal translator, Sam.
Yeah, but lip syncs perfectly as well somehow. Like it's flawless. That universal translator is a miracle of technology. So for me, that's like my day-to-day sci-fi fix would be growing up was watching Star Trek. I really enjoyed it. But with two movies, if Star Wars came out side by side alongside a Star Trek movie, and I got to see one of those movies, it's a Star Wars movie all day long. So that's
a good way to put it. Yeah,
it is.
Well done.
I agree. I mean, I hadn't even thought of it that way. I always think of sci-fi in terms of the ideas that they produce, and the nice thing about Star Wars is it has it has a few great ideas, and it plays it out into a really great human story, action movies, right? But each one of the Star Trek episodes, usually, I mean, apart from the pure on drama ones that are kind of painful, there's some idea, there's something that you can grab onto as a sci-fi aficionado, and I kind of like that. And I know, Tristan, you were talking about the fact that they come to a conclusion. I really enjoyed that as well. The kind of the 1 hour snippet, there was some sci-fi idea, they explore it kind of, and I personally really enjoyed that approach. I like to ingest my sci-fi in little bits.
Yeah, I remember my brother at one point saying Star Trek's better than Star Wars, and it was almost like, what did you just say? And it like kind of hurt a little bit. But this is when we were probably, I would have been teenager and he would have been just an older teenager. And it was just like, no, it's so much. No, you can't, just don't even say that. You're crazy. And then, yeah, over the past 10 years or so for myself, it's been like, no, it's, I like Star Trek a lot more. It gives me, it expands my horizons far more than Star Wars does. Star Wars is a fun adventure, but that, at the same time, what Sam said, if you could choose one at the movie theater, oh yeah, Star Wars. Mm-hmm. It's the cinematic experience, but it's also much more fantasy adventure than Star Trek being kind of true to what sci-fi should be, maybe.
Yeah, and it's, the other thing is it's harder for Star Wars to have a miss, right? There's very few misses in their movies, whereas there's a ton of misses in the Star Trek ones. Like there are a ton of really crappy Star Trek episodes, but because they did so many, just the quantity, there's a ton of real hits, and so there's those iconic episodes that you remember with those really cool ideas, and even some reasonable acting sometimes, and they're just simply because there's that frequency of episodes, there's the opportunity for better ones as well.
I feel like as a certified nerd, I should like Star Trek more, and I think I like Star Trek more, but I enjoy Star Wars more. Like Star Wars is just they're different tracks, right, of narrative and sci-fi. Nothing is explained. in Star Wars, you just get to go faster than light. You get to have lightsabers. There's, psychic powers. It's a fantasy genre of sci-fi, right? And that is not Star Trek. And Star Trek's got the ideas, and I do like that and all that. But it's a little wonky, I gotta say. It actually it makes me think the new Star Trek I've been enjoying more than kind of the old Star Trek. Just in terms of the movies, right? The prequel guys, the adventure is sort of there. They're
Well, they've become more Star
skydiving
Wars like.
planets, and and so it's more enjoyable now than it used to be. But you can't beat Star Trek for the ideas.
Kevin, do you have some news for us?
I had a couple things that I wanted to chat about. The first one is just cool news, and apparently this is not news to everybody, but it was news to me, and it relates to what we talked about last month. And I promise you, I'm not always going to be talking about Elon Musk and his companies, but this will be the last time. Maybe.
No, don't. No, I like talking about that guy.
Yeah, well,
Real life
here's
sci-fi.
it's because he does stuff like this. So he was on the Joe Rogan show the other day, and he said that the next version of the Tesla Roadster is going to have rockets on it. And of course everybody, and I thought I was just joking about it, but I read more of the transcript, and it's a known thing that they've been talking about making the license plate go down, and there be 3 tons worth of rocket thrust that'll come out the back through the form of compressed air, not through heat generating rockets that would melt the paint on the car behind them. But yeah, the Roadster is going to have this rocket to allow it to accelerate faster than it already does, which is something like 0 to 60 miles per hour in 1.8 or 1.9 seconds, which is ungodly fast.
Wow.
And I mean, how do you make it go any faster? You can see the engineers all scratching their heads, and they say, well, let's just put rockets on it. So
that goes well with the underground roads, right? Like if it's just a straight road, then this cars can drive themselves really fast.
Let's rocket it up as well.
Wow.
As if the top speed of above 200 miles an hour wasn't fast enough. So yeah, and not only that, he was half joking, but said that they've been, from the R&D perspective, trying to sort it out, is having 4 downward rockets on the corners of it so that it could hover. And Joe Rogan apparently said, well, why? What are you going to do with that? Are you actually going to be able to fly from city to city? And he said, no, it would be more of a stabilizing safety feature in case of let's say you get airborne for some reason, maybe because you put a rocket on the back of it and you happen to hit a speed bump or something like that. So yeah, apparently they're going to be putting rockets on this thing.
Wow.
So you lose the back seats. I actually didn't know that the Tesla Roadster had back seats, but you lose the back seats because they fill it with something, presumably tanks of compressed air. Madness.
This sounds perfectly suited to a Darwin Award very soon. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's already a Darwin Award for somebody who has DIY'd his own car with some rockets on it and ended up in the side of a cliff.
Yeah. Another thing is Marty, something you were talking about, is this confirmation by the Pentagon of videos coming from their equipment about unidentified flying objects in Earth atmosphere. Right. And you had pointed this out, and I thought it was pretty cool because in 2007 and then again in 2015 there were videos recorded by U.S. F-18s that had been scrambled to go find out what are these strange radar blips that are over the Pacific Ocean somewhere around a ship. In particular, one of them was around a ship, one of their, I don't know, one of the U.S. ships. And so they go out there, and there was some type of seething in the water, something underneath that the waves were breaking on, and 40 feet above it was some object that was jutting around, not like you would imagine a traditional aircraft to be doing. And they locked onto it, and they had this video which they released, and they weren't supposed to have released it. Apparently, it was done unbeknownst to whomever the powers that be are in the U.S. Air Force. And it was only this recently in 2020 that the Pentagon said, you know what, just to clear up any any misunderstandings about what this was, is these were actually videos from our equipment. They were from our F-18s. So they weren't denying it. And they're saying, yeah, and we don't know what it was. We have
Just
no
to
idea.
clear this up, we have no idea. And
Yeah.
I saw those videos. Those were F-18s, U.S. Navy F-18s, and
Okay.
you can hear the pilots in the video, like just freaking out, like kind of having fun, right? Like, look at that thing, you know? Like they're just really kind of. I mean, they're not freaked out by it, but they're definitely like, you know, they're pleasantly freaked out. They're like, you know what I mean? Like, finally.
Yeah.
My UFO experience, like my enlistment was worth it.
Well, it was neat too because the quotes for one of the stories there were two pilots who both corroborated the story, and there was also a radar worker, the guy who was manning the radar station, and they all had very similar stories. And one of the pilots said, at the end, I don't know what it was, but whatever it was, I want to go fly it. It looked like a lot of fun. But yeah, they had to go rendezvous 60 miles south of that point, and at 40 miles, the radar guy says, "Hey, the thing is back on you." So whatever it was, it disappeared off radar and then came back to where they were 40 miles away within seconds.
Right.
So is it from our world, or is it from another?
Oh, good question, Tristan. What do you think?
Well, we're Star Trek people, so we think it's from here. These two guys think it's from Mars. No.
Yeah. But, well, I was in the U.S. Navy, and I was stationed in the Pacific, and it's big. It's really big. And if you want to hide a secret base on this planet, that's where you hide it. You drop it in the Pacific, and chances of getting happened upon, I think, would generally be slim. You know, you're not over any kind of land base. You don't have a lot of radar to worry about. And if obviously it proved that it could show up on our radar, we could detect them moving. So that's one thing. And so if you want to avoid that, underwater base. So Star Wars, that's for me clearly Rebel base, Empire. Who knows? It's one of the two clearly, and that's my vote.
Well, I have two competing theories about aliens. One is that they're aliens, and the other is that they're not. But what the world learned. Try to keep it simple. What the world learned after the Second World War is you only get to use a new weapon super effectively once before everybody else gets it, very quickly. And so it's been since 1945. What is that? It's like, 60, 80 years, something that people have, every government in the world worth its salt. Why would they release a new technology to the public? We're worthless, right? They've been dribbling out. They have billions and billions and billions of dark money that's been piled into, developing weapons, when the most important thing to have about a new weapon is that nobody else knows about it, because otherwise they'd have it, and you won't have the advantage of using it when it comes to a real shooting war. And so I think there's so much buried technology. When you look back on the last 60 years, we haven't done anything. There hasn't been a new airplane. There hasn't been a new propulsion system. There hasn't been, new trains, like nothing, right? Like we've been doing the same thing since like the 50s, basically, except for the iPhone. And like, where is all that? Like it's happening, I'm sure, right? I'm sure the U.S. just has so much that's secret, and you'd keep it private, and you'd keep it in private hands and private mercenary things. And like, why give it to the rest of the world when you think about it, the billionaires?
Yeah, I would hazard to say that I'm of two minds as well, that they could be aliens or not, and I think really, the footage is compelling. The fact that it doesn't happen often enough that we actually get any real good footage of it really makes me very skeptical these days, because everything is recorded all the time. So either if they are aliens, then they're doing a really good job of just hanging out over where Sam says, where it's the middle of the Pacific, and there's maybe one ocean liner every 3 days or something, and they're unlikely to be spotted. Or yeah, this clandestine evil overlord moneybags, evil Elon Musk building a some type of anti-gravity weapon, or U.S. government. Anyway, it's a big
Well, that's
topic,
great.
that.
Good work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting.
My wins.
It's bigger than life as we know it. That one, and it almost seems like it could be on the verge of being explained.
Wouldn't that be nice, eh?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I've been waiting a long time to do this. I think Marty has too.
Yeah. Well, my recommendation is Neverness by David Zindell. One of my one of my favorite books. It's from 1981.
I think it's later than that. I don't mean to correct you.
1988.
Yeah, it's quite a bit later.
1988. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. 1988, late 80s. It's the first book by David Zindell. It's his first novel. It's a book in 3 parts. The first part, he puts you into this world in this city called Icefall. No, the planet is called Icefall. The city is called Neverness, and it's almost a Harry Potter style story. It's a story of a student, in a college. He's a mathematician, or a member of the Order of Mystical Mathematicians and Other Seekers of the Ineffable Flame, which is amazing. And this is sort of like a university, an academic society. There are different disciplines. And the highest and the greatest of the disciplines is the Order of the Pilots, and the pilots are these people who are capable of traversing the space-time manifold by doing sort of live, real-time mathematics to finester through the folds of space and time in order to move a spaceship around.
And the thing is the world building, as you said, he does create this unbelievable universe, like this galaxy of humans and post-humans that a lot like Ian M. Banks, he doesn't explain fully. But he does, like at the very beginning, he name drops them, but then he does touch on them, right? Like, so throughout the book, you get enough, you get a sentence or two, if you're really paying attention, where he paints this picture of a society that has gone post-human in a certain way and carked their genes, right, in a specific way, and what the remembrancers are, and the scryers and the different orders, and you get a little bit more color on that as it goes along. So it's filling in the blanks. Where I kind of like those books where it poses a question. It's almost like a little problem. What's that society all about, or what is that group all about? And then you're kind of looking for clues as the book continues. But it means that there's a lot of moving parts. And like you said, I mean, Tristan, man, oh man, he just threw stuff at you and just kept throwing amazing thoughts and ideas and really deep concepts. And I almost wanted to just start taking notes of all the really cool things that he brought to the forefront, like different, I always talk about ideas, but really just different ideas, different philosophies, and ways of thinking about philosophies. Like the number of times that he was talking about free will and exploring the concept of free will in different ways, and talking about your programming, sort of the nature component of our behavior versus nurture, right? And but then who programs the programmer is something that he said several times around the free will thing. And there were a lot of philosophical concepts that I said, I haven't thought of it that way. And I'm a fairly thoughtful guy in my 40s who's done a fair bit of reading, and I'm amazed when I come out into those sorts of things in a sci-fi book. So this book did that for me. So this also was one of my very favorite books, like of any book I've read. It was genuinely a really good read. Definitely a different type of book, and the writing style, even I could really tell, was like, he's a good writer. And I mean, he couldn't have been writing for that long when he was 30. And to write this as a first or second novel or whatever it was, his first novel is, to me, really, really, really impressive. I don't know how many times I had to sort of put the book down and just sort of shake my head and saying, wow, that was an extremely well-written sentence. And you know what I mean? Like, I wish I could come up with that. And Anyway, I really enjoyed it. I thought the resolution, which I won't talk about too much at the end, was great. And as you said, the character becomes so much more likable at the end. I absolutely loved the idea of the warrior poets. You know, this concept of a group of humans that have modified themselves to a huge degree, and that they're trying to rank themselves and become extremely good at killing people and writing poetry, right? These two polar opposites, to the point where, you know, they wear a ring with different colors depending on how good they are at killing people, and on the other hand, they do it on their ranking of how good they are with poetry. And anyway, and then their first female warrior poet goes on to do amazing things. And in that character, Kalinda is my absolute favorite in this book. I just shook my head when I found out about her past and what she becomes.
Yeah. Well, I thought Neverness was amazing. I was actually shocked by how much I liked it. Right from the start, and the further I got in, the more I liked it. Marty, you're right. It took it was kind of in three portions. You're kind of learning about the world and in space, then you go somewhere that's the exact opposite, almost. And then you're back out in space for a full resolve. It did all of that. It definitely felt like it's a young man's book. It really captured that main character, Mallory Ringess, that's a cocky young man who thinks he knows everything. And it's almost like the David Zindell kind of channeled himself to bring this out, because he's a young man writing a novel of this complexity is amazing. Because he was, I don't know how old he was, but he was quite young.
Yeah, he was 30.
30. So, yeah, he just it was brave of him to do what he did, and he pulled it off. At times, though, I do see how it's he tries to tackle so much that it has a sense of immaturity to it at the same time, because it's almost like the young person who thinks they know everything about the world, and thinks, and something I think happens naturally with a lot of people is when you're in your early 20s, you think you can change the world. Like, you think you can have an effect. You think there's something that's possible. And that's just the cockiness of our youth. And that came out in the poetry of the book, and the main character being so not necessarily unlikable, but almost. I've never enjoyed a character I didn't like so much as much as in this book, because he's not that much of a likable character until almost like the last 30 pages. You're like, oh, so now he's matured after years and years of following him, because the whole book takes place over many years.
Yeah, for me, it was a step outside my comfort zone. You know, like I sort of liken the style to a '70s fantasy novel. You know, and in the writing and the the sort of philosophical approach. And I've only recently sort of tuned my ear to this style. I think, even 6 months ago, if I had picked this book up in a bookstore and skimmed it just to sort of check it out, I probably would have put it back. So for me, it was a nice sort of expansion of my of what I'm open to, and what I'll taste test, because it does get pretty romantic in the writing style, but it works, and I felt there's a lot of care to the writing, and in a way that made me want to continue even during the hard parts, because there's slow parts. Like, there are parts of this book where I was like, it's starting to feel like work, and the ideas to me were really kind of new in a lot of ways, or had a new approach. I really liked the approach to space travel, that it's sort of how space travel was sort of an organic exercise, as this process of decision trees have to be solved in order to travel through different types of space and time. And I haven't read that anywhere. I don't know of, I just haven't read enough of these, there's just enough books to have encountered it before, but I can't think of this sort of love affair with math and it being applied to these concepts that he comes up with in the book, like and how it's applied to space travel and remembering, and even just as they cark themselves into different. I love the language too. That gets me to the language piece. Is it all feels recognizable and human and evolved in a way that I totally buy as well. But anyways, it's his approach to math is a love affair with math, and he's a mathematician, so it makes sense. And the way he approached this topic for me really sold the book. Those are the strongest parts of the book for me. I kept on coming up with questions, I think, for you, Marty. I was like, well, we have a physicist on the team here. So the whole idea of a grand theorem, what does, is that still a thing? Is that possible? Because for me, I kept thinking, there's one quote, I even took a photo of it from my phone because I'm on a Kobo. So if I want to save a page, it's easier if I just take a photo of it. And so a quote that I liked and it's from the author, mathematics is a game. Its pieces are axioms we create, and its rules are logic. That mathematics is occasionally useful to mechanics and pilots is accidental. And I kind of love that. Like, math doesn't care. But in your mind, is there such thing as a grand theorem, one unified theory?
I think yes. I think ultimately we'll get there. The beautiful thing that he touches upon, though, is a very real thing in physics and in mathematics and philosophy of science and the actual, history of theoretical physics is this, question, right? It is mysterious to the practitioners of mathematics that it's useful, that it just works sometimes, right? Some branches of mathematics have absolutely nothing to do with, like, pure mathematicians are a different breed, right? Like, pure mathematics is like, it's not calculus. It's not like calculating useful things. Pure mathematicians do wacky stuff all the time, completely in the brain world that, you would be very hard pressed to imagine a use for. And then there seems to be this amazing domain of a bunch of other mathematics that's incredibly useful, right? And it's always been a bit of a fortuitous mystery, I think, to those people, right? They're like, wow. And everything in this, like, intellectual construct here maps directly onto what actually happens to be true about the physical world. And it's not necessarily the case. So I think he captures that really well with exactly that quote that you read, right? That we practice mathematics for the beauty of mathematics itself. And then we're, like, gifted this amazing thing that, like, in this case, there is actually a branch of mathematics, what he called differential topology. I think, this is really a thing that people do, and it happens to be the kind of mathematics you need to do general relativity, which is, the sort of manipulation of space-time, higher dimensional shapes. And so he really is describing kinds of mathematics that exist that you could imagine would be necessary to actually understand and manipulate and solve things about the space-time void or the space-time continuum, and whether or not that's a unified theory, right? Like, they talk about a unified sort of the grand theorem, which is really about the topological properties of space-time, right? Is it true that you could actually go from any point to any other point, in a simple mapping or whatever he says? It's like you have to imagine that they're doing this mathematics of higher dimensional structures, and there's, like, topological things. Topology is like the connectivity between places rather than geometry, and they're trying to prove that it's possible. And if you can prove that it's possible that every point is ultimately connected to every other point, then you should be able to finester between them. So I don't know if that's true. But again, a different.
Prove it for us, Marty.
Yeah,
our question is there a unified theory of all the forces? Who knows? But that gets back to what we were talking about earlier, right? About, like, well, if there's connections, if there's a unified theory, right, that translates how light interacts with the weak force, with the strong force, and with gravity, then we can start using electromagnetic type technology to manipulate gravity. And then you start getting anti-grav and UFOs and things like that. Anyway, good question. Thank you.
No, because it married into another quote that came up. It said, we simultaneously create math and discover it. So that threw me as well. So there's so much of this book, like these parts of it where it felt like, is a stream of consciousness, or am I just not getting it? Like, and so there was and that was, anyway, so sort of, you sort of spoke to that, but there was a lot of that happened for me in this book, which made it simultaneously fun and frustrating at the same time. It's like, damn it, is that a thing or not a thing?
Yeah, well, that thing is a thing. Yeah, totally. The
Well,
discovery versus creation. There are people that really believe, the math is first, the math is real, and it's secondary that it happens to reflect reality. And then there's some people that are like, no, no, you can't learn things without reality. We're actually imitating, by studying reality, we figure out, we discover mathematics in the real world, right? Instead of the other way around. But I think this has been a question since, Plato.
Hmm. What is the ontology of math? Is it
Right.
knowable, or is it the knowing of it that becomes the math itself? Right. And then once we create it, how much of it's actually a social construction that is entirely human based, right? And how much of it is actually reflecting something objectively non-human?
I think the Mallory, the main character, asks the goddess that, does he not? Does he not ask about mathematics and is everything mathematics? And I think I forget the answer that she gives. I don't know if Marty or one of you guys remember.
I don't remember directly, but I imagine she gives both answers. That's her
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, she's like the goddess trickster, isn't she? And is she not? Did I misunderstand it? So she's not actually as become a god in the way that the Eldra, Ieldra, I'm not sure how to pronounce that,
Okay.
had, so that so the message from the Eldra like was buried into this junk DNA, and that you use that to bridge yourself from human into God form, and that she actually came in a sort of roundabout way. Am I thinking of the wrong
I think so.
goddess
She
here?
did it without instructions, right? She didn't
Correct.
have the instructions of the Illedra, so she's a little crazy.
Right, exactly. So, because she has sort of taken this warrior poet route
Hmm.
to godhood,
Hmm.
and that had sort of impacted her thinking and logic and made her a little on the crazy side.
She's my
Or,
fave,
yeah,
the solid state entity. She's
solidly.
definitely
Hmm.
my absolute best character, I think, in almost any book I've read, probably.
Wow.
Just the transitions and the fact that she's got moon brains scattered around the galaxy.
Yeah. And that
That's
she's still
Hmm.
just a junior god. Like I love
yeah.
that, right? That she's like, oh well, the senior gods, like the real gods, they think I'm crazy. But I
Hmm.
can recreate and reincarnate, Bardo with the just thinking about it.
Yep.
Her powers are astounding.
Yep. And when I found out that she has a red ring for both poetry and for killing people, that's what did it for me.
Yeah.
Best character.
Yeah, overall, loved it. Quite amazed at the level of complex poetry, because it's not really, I mean, there's some real actual poetry in there, but just his sentencing, so many commas and long sentences. I like that personally. And it just makes his writing beautiful in that
It
way.
is. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, overall, just really adored that story a lot.
I think they call that lyrical. When I was reading reviews afterwards, I realized I like lyrical books.
Hmm.
It is that style of sort of flamboyant, exuberant writing. I think you're totally right on, Tristan, about the interest that this is a young man's book, that there is this sort of naivete and naive exuberance, to his writing, where I'm just like, I'm gonna tackle it all. We're gonna talk about the meaning of life, the secret to the whole shebang. We're gonna go to space, we're gonna go to the caves, we're gonna do it all, right? And he just goes for it. I love that, and it's so rare to see.
So I gotta give it up to Sam for really sparking an interest in graphic novels in me lately. And Sam lent some out to us. One in particular, Isola. And then and Marty passed around Red Sun, and I thought we should talk about that a little bit.
I think you could qualify Isola as more fantasy in terms of genre, but it's one of those rare graphic novels that's well written and well drawn, and that's usually it's one or the other. It's you kind of get teams of artists, writers, and they like each other and they work well together, and usually there's a weak link in there, and sort of in this type of publishing where it's not a DC or Marvel, and so this is put up by Image Comics, and they It's an evil spell has been cast on the Queen of Mar, and her captain of the guard will do anything to reverse it. And their only hope lies on an island half a world away. And so they're on this sort of quest to cure this guard to cure her beloved queen of this curse. And they're through this magical, torn, post-apocalyptic type fantasy landscape. And the first compendium is really good. The second one, the writing fluctuates a little bit, but still stays on track, and it's just a great read. I grew up collecting comics and reading comics, particularly in high school, and I kind of left comics and graphic novels for a little while, and then came back more strongly in the last couple of years. And I recently went into a local comic book store about a year ago and just said, "Hey, like, what's your favorite comic? Like, here's what I'm kind of into. What do you recommend?" And she didn't hesitate. She just steered me over to Isola and said, "Just take this home and you're good." And I was. So that's that one I've been passing around. And so there's 2 compendiums that are out. And it's written by Brendan Fletcher and Carl Kerschel, and the art is by Msassyk, and I don't know how to pronounce that. And Carl Kerschel as well. And so they're a great team, and their letterer is Anita Bidikar. So I'm probably doing a terrible job of those pronunciations, but I think it's important to get those names out there if I'm going to be referencing their comic. But that's my recommendation to anyone. It's an easy access to a really good graphic novel. It comes out as and now it's not published as a single purpose sort of graphic novel. It's a series, a monthly comic book series, and then I just buy it as a graphic novel every 3 or 4 months or so. So that's what I mean when I say a compendium. But I'll throw to Marty on Red Sun, because that was a lot of fun. It's a great take on Superman. It's hard to do something new with a character as classic as Superman. This graphic novel definitely achieves it. So I'll throw it to you, Marty.
Sure, yeah. Well, Red Sun is for me was what A Solo was for you, the first graphic novel that impressed me, or sort of as an adult, sort of brought me back in. I got it for my kids, and I read it before I gave them to each of them, and they read it and they loved it. It's a great alternative history take on Superman, where instead of landing his, as a baby, his spaceship landing in Kansas, it lands in the USSR. And so Superman is found and raised as a communist, and of course he's the hero and has all the ideals of the communists, and he's there to help everyone, and this comic makes it clear to you very quickly, I think, and strangely, right? This hero, this character, is the archetype of America. Actually fits in the USSR perfectly well when you think about the ideals of Superman and the ideals of communism. He's there to help people and save them and work for the common man and all of these things. So this graphic novel, is this alternate history. Of course, there's an alternate history Batman in the USSR. Lex Luthor is in America as the villain. And it sort of plays out, how this would all go. It's a little, the comic book itself, I think, does an admirable job of not being too pro-communism or pro-capitalism. He sort of walks a fine line. You might think it'd be a jingoistic sort of American exercise by the end of showing how it all went horribly wrong. And it does go horribly wrong, of course. But it's a subtle and interesting political story, but the best part is the ending is amazing. They really pull off this incredible kind of, sci-fi twist on the time travel, time loop with this comic that I think is bold and interesting and really cool. How it sort of makes you reimagine Superman's history and Superman's ancestors on Krypton, and even. So that's Red Sun. I love any book or comic book that really surprises me at the end. with like with something like +1. Like, you thought this was good, now look at this. Wow, here's a crazy ending, and this one really pulls that off. I love this comic book because of that. I haven't read anything that's impressed me as much as this one.
And Batman is the resistance, right? He's part of the rebel force, and it's not just one guy. It started out as one guy, but then Batman becomes more, right? And
Yeah.
that was a neat idea, is that Batman is a group of rebels eventually.
Yeah.
And the artwork's fantastic too. It's got that social realist quality, right? Like that Superman was built for. If you look at any kind of propaganda and Soviet propaganda, there's that sort of, proud standing, worker, with a, usually with some farm implement, but it's Superman.
Marty, what short stories should we be reading?
You should read Ted Chiang. My favorite most recently, well, my first favorite of his was from his first compilation. It was called The Story of Your Life. And it's the story that Arrival, the movie Arrival, was based on. He wrote it 20 years before they made the movie. This is actually one of his first stories. It's more of a novella. It's like a good 60, 70 pages. And it blew me away. I mean, it's just exactly what I want out of a story, a sci-fi. It's literature. It's about humans. It's about a mother, thinking and remembering her daughter. It's like, but it plays the time card, and it works in the physics. It tells it like this, very human level story, where he's really using this as a way of teaching you something about cool physics, about the action principle. There's different formulations of quantum mechanics, basically, that make you think about time differently, or what time might be. And he manages to actually weave a story together to explain this deep physics about how time works in the universe. And I've never read anything else like it. Like, it blew me away. It was amazing. So, A Story of Your Life. Finally, I'll mention one more, The Exhalation, which is the title story of the second compilation. Again, one of the most amazing stories I've ever read. Kevin, we talked about this one, I think, at some point. It's the story of basically a clockwork, air pressure, piston sort of powered robot, and an entire civilization of these robots who discover that they're robots, and then take themselves apart to figure out how their brain works, and realize that it's all working on sort of air pressure. And it's a story about the physics of entropy in the universe. Basically, he wrote this story about these robots learning how they work, and finding out that basically the pressure differential that drives all action in their universe is waning, and can never be rebuilt, and they're thinking more slowly and acting more slowly, and their entire universe is running down. And again, he just does this amazing job of taking like a really creative, super cool story about fascinating characters, and telling you a deep sort of lesson about physics. In this case, he's talking about the entropy of the universe running down, and useful energy, the heat death of the universe, basically, in terms of clockwork and pistons and air pressure. So, Ted Chiang, he's a hell of a writer.
He's also unique because all of his short stories have different voices. They're completely different. Like he's to me the quintessential good short story writer, because there are very few similarities between any of his short stories. I've only read the second group, like the Exhalation. I haven't read his first one, and amongst those, I wouldn't know that they're the same author. Honestly,
Right.
they're
Yeah.
completely different stories, different voices. The characters are different. At one moment he'll be talking about what happens if we have sentient AI. Another moment he'll be talking about this, differential in pressure way of computing, and the next moment he's be talking about different types of time travel in the Middle East. Right? It's such a not a hodgepodge, but very deliberate, separate sets of stories that are all really, really good.
Yeah. Kevin, I think it's time for you to take us into the next book. What are we reading next?
Yeah, well, my turn again. I have been wanting to get a Neil Stephenson book into this book club for a long time.
Oh, I'm excited now.
And I know, Tristan, you just finished Cryptonomicon, but I haven't been able to figure out how to get Neil Stephenson into the past, because his books are these huge tomes, right? He is a verbose author, and we don't have time to get through his books in 1 month. If we had infinite time, I would be recommending Seven Eves, because that's a great one. I really enjoyed that book, but it's 880 pages, and we struggled to get through, this last book, which was only 680 thereabouts. So I would like to impose upon you Snow Crash, which was one of his earlier books from 1992. This is only 4 years after Neverness, actually, in terms of age, but totally different genre. If Neverness is the lyrical writing, Snow Crash is the opposite. And I know that some of you have read it, but this is the original kind of dystopian cyberpunk, post Neuromancer, moving into what the internet could be in the early 90s. And as a kid who would, in a very nerdy way, wear RAM chips around his neck in high school, this was an emblematic book of my youth, and I loved it. I mean, this was a book that at the time I thought was just the cat's meow, and I honestly have not read it since the 90s. So this will be my first read through it. So I'm hoping that it does not come back to bite me when I read it and I say, oh man, that was so dated. But I've read through some of the, for those of you who don't know the book, the protagonist is named Hero Protagonist, and it's this dystopian future Earth, Los Angeles, where there exists a future version of the internet where you can kind of move around it like Second Life, where you're an avatar, and it's very realistic, and people have virtual meeting rooms, kind of like Ready Player One. And in fact, Ready Player One, I think, draws a lot from Snow Crash and these types of VR worlds. But it's real life. It's also virtual life. There's mafia involvement. There's love interest. There's mystery. There's violence. It's a dark read, but I think it's a great one. It's a page turner, as I remember it anyway. So I hope you like it. So what do you guys think about that?
I am super excited about that.
I'm totally into it. I've actually just downloaded it on my Kobo, so here it is. I'm very
awesome.
Ready to go.
That was quick.
Nice. Start it right now.
It's,
I will.
It's 480 pages. 480 is short by Neil Stephenson standards.
Yeah, it is too.
I've tried reading the Diamond Age a few times. That's the only one of his I can't seem to get into. So maybe this will jumpstart me back into his stuff so I can finish. Have you guys read Diamond Age?
Not me.
It's it's around the same time. I think one of his early novels, and more. No, I don't know if it's steampunk actually, but sounds good. Snow Crash.
Awesome. All right, so my favorite part of this show is trivia. I got to be honest. I love trivia.
Okay, well then, no pressure on me here. So I picked this question and thinking that this would actually be really hard. And now, having just listened to everyone speak, I realized that I need to maybe up my trivia game. I think I have a feeling like last time someone's going to be like that with this one. We'll see. Which visionary sci-fi writer had a robot android built of their likeness?
Their
Phil K.
likeness.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
I was like, this is I gotta really have to up my game. Yes. David Hansen, founder of Hansen Robotics, created a robot that resembles Philip K. Dick, and the robot was capable of making of talking, maintaining eye contact, recognizing faces, and holding conversation, even simulating a real person's personality. And it was on tour in 2005, I believe. There's some conflicting stories on this, but in 2005, either the robot's head or the robot in its entirety was lost at at the Las Vegas airport, and according to this article, remains at large. But
Wow.
then and then recently, sort of recently, a few years ago, I think in 2017, the robot was revived, and I'm not sure if it was found or parts of it was found, or David Hansen just built another one. And so, if you want to look at like a creepy talking mannequin that is able to discuss sort of a certain range of topics, then you can seek out the Dick Bot.
I am not marking that down as a swear word. A little factoid here would be Sophia the robot. You know Sophia? You guys have seen Sophia?
Mm.
So she is Hanson Robotics, and she's getting more popular. They're starting to come up with, I believe, miniature Sophias that you can have in your home.
I just Googled this Philip K. Dick bot, and it is fully on in that uncanny valley where they are creepy. That they're trying to look human but don't look quite human, so they look creepy. That's what a lot of the robot designers try to avoid, is that uncanny valley, and it is really a freaky looking little beast.
Would you have a Philip K. Dick bot in your house? I think I would. Right by my bed. It could read me stories to put me to sleep. I would love that. Okay, Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson. We are reading it, and we hope that you can join us on the next episode of Tales from the Bridge. Thank you. Until next time.